The alien world was quiet, untouched by the human presence. On a distant planet, far from the reaches of Earth, a peaceful species called the Tsilians had thrived for centuries. Their home, a vibrant and lush planet, was known for its shimmering rivers and towering forests that stretched as far as the eye could see. The Tsilians were a calm and intelligent species, well versed in the mysteries of the universe, but they had never encountered a species quite like humans. They had always kept to themselves, watching the stars with wonder, but never daring to venture too far into the unknown. For years, they had peacefully lived, working in harmony with nature and focusing on learning from the vast universe around them. Yet, that peace was soon to be broken. In the darkness of space, a human exploration mission was underway. A team of scientists, eager to make their mark in the name of discovery, had traveled far across the galaxy to investigate the unknown world of the Tsilians. They had heard rumors of strange energy signatures coming from the planet, and their curiosity pushed them to investigate. The mission was simple: observe the planet, study its resources, and return with valuable data. But what the humans didn't realize was that their arrival would trigger something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. As the human ship descended into the atmosphere, the Tsilians noticed the strange disturbances in their world. It began with a low hum that rippled through the air, unnoticed at first. But soon, the once tranquil planet began to tremble. It was as if something was awakening deep within the core of their world. The Tsilians, alarmed and confused, tried to decipher the cause, but they couldn't understand. It wasn't until the humans touched down on the surface that the true nature of the disturbance became clear. A small research team of humans set foot on the Tsilian planet, carefully making their way through the dense forest. Equipped with advanced tools and technology, they began scanning the environment, unaware of the alien forces they were about to disturb. Among the team was Dr. Edward Jansen, a brilliant but overly ambitious scientist. His curiosity had led him to believe that this planet held untold secrets, something that could revolutionize human understanding of the universe. The energy readings had been strange, and he couldn't resist the temptation to explore further. Dr. Jansen and his team set up their equipment, scanning the terrain for unusual energy sources. They didn't realize that the energy they were detecting wasn't a simple anomaly, but the dormant power of an ancient force. The Tsilians' greatest secret, without proper knowledge of the planet's inhabitants or the hidden powers that lay beneath the surface, they activated the scanners, unknowingly triggering a chain of events that would change everything. The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate, and a low, eerie hum filled the air. It was as if the very planet was alive, awakening from a deep slumber. The team looked around, unease creeping over them. They felt a sudden change in the air, a heavy pressure pressing down on their chests. The trees around them rustled violently, and the sky above turned dark, as if warning them of the impending doom. It was too late to turn back. The ground suddenly split open, sending a shockwave through the team. The force of the blast threw Dr. Jansen and his team members off their feet. The air was thick with energy, and the temperature rapidly began to rise. The ground around them cracked, and strange, glowing veins of energy started to pulse through the earth, spreading outward like veins of fire. Dr. Jansen's eyes widened in shock as he realized what they had done. They had unleashed something far beyond their comprehension. The energy they had been probing was not just a source of power, it was alive. And now, it was awakening. A massive structure emerged from the ground, its shape shifting and pulsing with the energy of the planet. The Tsilians had built it long ago, a device of immense power, designed to protect their world from the dangerous forces that lay beneath. But in their isolation, the Tsilians had long forgotten about it. The humans, in their eagerness to explore, had triggered its activation. As the structure rose higher, the air around it grew hot. The energy it released surged outward, searing everything in its path. Dr. Jansen scrambled to his feet, but it was clear that they were no longer in control of the situation. The ground continued to tremble, and the energy surged through the air in waves. The humans were powerless against it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the planet, the Xiliens were becoming aware of the disturbance. The peaceful, calm race that had once lived in harmony with nature now felt the ancient energy stirring. It was an old force, one that had been sealed away for a reason. The Xiliens knew that if the energy was awakened, it would lead to chaos. They had learned long ago that certain powers were too dangerous to be unleashed. The Xiliens, sensing the imminent threat, began their journey toward the source of the disturbance. They had hoped to remain hidden from the humans, but it seemed that their world was no longer safe. With great urgency, the Xiliens called upon their leaders, who gathered to discuss what could be done to stop the humans and their dangerous experiment. They knew the humans had no understanding of the forces they were meddling with, and it was only a matter of time before the planet, and the humans, would be consumed by the consequences of their actions. Back at the site of the explosion, Dr. Jansen and his team watched in horror as the structure reached its full height. The alien energy within it was now fully awake, and the planet was changing before their eyes. The trees were turning to ash, the rivers evaporating in the intense heat. It was clear that this wasn't just a simple malfunction. They had awakened something that would destroy everything in its path. Dr. Jansen's heart raced as he realized the magnitude of what they had done. He had come to the planet seeking knowledge, but now he was faced with the destruction of an entire world. As the alien structure continued to pulse, the fiery energy surged through the air, growing stronger and stronger. It was only a matter of time before it would consume everything in its path. The team's equipment began to short-circuit, unable to handle the intense energy being released. Dr. Jansen tried to send out a distress signal, but it was hopeless. The energy was too powerful. The team had no way to communicate with their ship or the rest of the mission. Suddenly, there was a flash of light. The structure that had once been dormant was now fully alive, its energy reaching out like a wave, crashing into everything it touched. The temperature around them soared, and the air became thick with smoke and ash. The Xiliens had arrived, but they were too late. The damage had already been done. Dr. Jansen looked up at the sky, his heart sinking as he realized that the alien species they had encountered was far more advanced than they could have ever imagined. And now, they would have to face the consequences of their greed and ambition. The aliens' fiery transformation had begun. The air was thick with an overwhelming heat. The energy surge that had erupted from the alien structure only moments before had transformed the once serene landscape into a fiery battlefield. Dr. Jansen and his team, stunned by the catastrophic events they had inadvertently set in motion, struggled to stay on their feet, each step feeling heavier than the last, as the very ground seemed to tremble underfoot. For a brief moment, Dr. Jansen stood still, his breath ragged, his mind racing to comprehend the situation. What had they done? The energy pulse that had shot from the alien structure was no mere accident. It was alive, an ancient force, deeply intertwined with the planet itself. A force they had awakened. As the blinding light from the energy wave began to dissipate, the landscape around them was almost unrecognizable. The lush forests that had once surrounded them were now reduced to ash, the rivers evaporating in the intense heat, leaving behind only dry, cracked earth. The temperature around them was unbearable, yet it wasn't just the heat that terrified Dr. Jansen. It was the realization that the planet itself had started to fight back. "Is everyone all right?" Dr. Jansen called out, his voice barely audible over the crackling of the flames and the distant rumble of the earth. His team, shaken but not entirely defeated, managed to regain their footing. They were disoriented, their equipment malfunctioning as the electromagnetic pulse from the energy wave disrupted every piece of technology they had. They tried to re-establish communication with the ship, but there was no signal. The planet had cut them off from any form of outside help. They were stranded. The ground continued to tremble beneath them, and in the distance, they could see the alien structure, now fully awakened, glowing with a bright, unnatural light. The energy surging from it had already begun to warp the environment, and the humans knew they had little time before the entire planet succumbed to the destructive power they had unleashed. "We need to move," one of the team members, Sarah, shouted. Her voice was full of panic as she pointed towards the darkening sky, where the ominous glow of the alien structure continued to grow. "The energy is spreading. We have to find shelter." "Agreed," Dr. Jansen replied, his mind whirling. "But we need to find a way to stop this. We can't just run. This isn't just a natural disaster. This is something much worse." The team, knowing that survival was their immediate priority, began to move quickly. They started making their way toward a nearby cave, hoping to find some refuge from the scorching heat and the unknown force that had now taken over the planet. But even as they walked, they could feel the pressure building around them. The very air felt dense, as if the planet itself was drawing them in, suffocating them. The cave, once a shelter for ancient life forms, had long been abandoned. Yet, as they approached it, Dr. Jansen felt a strange sense of unease wash over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone, that something else was watching them, waiting. He turned to look at the alien structure in the distance. Its glow seemed to pulse rhythmically, as though it were alive, aware of their every movement. They reached the cave, but the moment they stepped inside, Dr. Jansen knew it wasn't the safe haven they had hoped for. The cave was deep, and the air was thick with an unfamiliar energy, but it provided a temporary respite from the immediate dangers outside. For now, it was enough to give them a chance to regroup. But even inside the cave, the heat pressed in on them. It felt as though the planet itself was fighting them, pushing them into submission. The team huddled together, their minds racing with questions that had no answers. What had they unleashed? Was there any way to reverse the damage they had caused? "We need to understand what we're dealing with," Dr. Jansen said, breaking the silence. "We need to study the energy. Maybe there's a way to stop it before it destroys everything." But as he spoke, another rumble shook the ground, stronger this time, as though the planet was warning them again. The energy that had burst forth from the alien structure was not merely destructive. It was growing stronger. The ground beneath them began to shift, and cracks appeared along the walls of the cave. The air in the cave grew heavier, and Dr. Jansen realized that they weren't just dealing with an energy source. They were dealing with an ancient, sentient force that had the power to reshape the world around them. Outside the cave, the skies darkened, and the glowing light from the alien structure cast an eerie hue across the landscape. The planet was responding, and it was clear that it wasn't just a passive victim of human experimentation. This world was alive in ways they hadn't anticipated. The planet itself was a living organism, with a consciousness that was now awakening in response to the humans' interference. "We're not alone here," Dr. Jansen muttered to himself. "The planet, it's alive, and we've angered it." He turned to his team, his face pale. "This isn't just a natural disaster. The planet is reacting to us. We need to figure out how to communicate with it before it's too late." As the minutes passed, the situation grew more desperate. The temperature outside continued to rise, and the air felt almost toxic. The team was running out of time. They knew they needed to act quickly, but the longer they stayed on the planet, the more they realized that they had triggered something far beyond their comprehension. The alien structure, the energy surging from it, and the planet itself were part of a larger system, one that was ancient and incredibly powerful. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the cave, followed by a deep, rumbling sound. It was coming from outside. Dr. Jansen ran to the entrance of the cave and peered out. The glowing structure in the distance was now brighter than ever, and the air shimmered with the energy it emitted. But there was something new, something terrifying. From within the structure, an enormous surge of light shot into the sky, breaking through the atmosphere like a beacon. It was as if the planet was signaling, reaching out to something, or someone, far beyond their world. "This is it," Dr. Jansen said, his voice low and full of dread. "We've awakened something much more powerful than we ever imagined." The team watched in horror as the energy surged higher, becoming a blinding pillar of light. The planet was no longer just a passive observer. It was an active participant in the chaos they had unleashed. And now, with every passing second, they were drawing closer to the inevitable conclusion. The alien world would either destroy them or change them forever. As the light from the alien structure reached its peak, a sense of helplessness filled the air. The team could only watch as the energy continued to surge, consuming everything in its path. The struggle for survival had begun, and they knew they could no longer remain mere bystanders. The planet had awoken, and the battle for survival had just begun. The heat was unbearable. It wasn't just the searing temperatures from the alien structure. The very air itself seemed to be charged with an unnatural energy, pulsating through the planet like a heartbeat. Dr. Jansen and his team had barely managed to stay alive in the wake of their disastrous experiment, but they were starting to feel the consequences in ways they couldn't have predicted. The very landscape itself seemed to change before their eyes, warping in response to the awakening of the ancient energy. It was no longer a mere planet. It was alive. Meanwhile, the alien species, the Zillions, had begun to realize the extent of the disaster. They had once lived in peace, never imagining that humans could so carelessly awaken the destructive force that lay dormant beneath their world. Now, with the humans wreaking havoc, the Zillions had no choice but to confront the very thing they had long sealed away. In the heart of their homeland, deep beneath the surface, a young Zillion named Elira stood on the edge of a glowing chasm, her face bathed in the eerie, fiery light that filled the sky. She was no warrior, but her instincts told her that the time had come to make a choice. Fight or flee. The energy that had been released was far more than just a destructive force. It was part of the Zillion legacy, a weapon they had built long ago to protect their world from invaders. The question now was whether they could use it to protect themselves from the humans, or whether it would destroy them all. As Elira stared at the chasm, a deep sense of fear washed over her. The chasm was pulsing, the very energy of the planet flowing through it. It was clear now that the planet's sentient power was responding to the disturbance, and it was not going to be kind to the humans or anyone who got in its way. She closed her eyes, trying to connect with the ancient force, to understand its will, but the power was overwhelming, consuming everything in its path. Back at the site where the human team had been trapped, Dr. Jansen and his group were beginning to understand the full scope of the disaster they had set in motion. The alien structure that had once been dormant was not alive, and the energy it was emitting was beyond anything they could have predicted. Dr. Jansen watched in disbelief as the ground trembled, and the air around him began to shimmer with heat and power. He had seen the structure before. On the planet's surface, it had seemed like just another anomaly, another unknown relic of the past. But now, with the power it had unleashed, it was clear that it was something much more. A weapon. The Zillions had hidden it away, perhaps fearing its immense power. And now, it was awakening, responding to the humans' interference, and starting to take control of the world around them. But the most shocking revelation was what happened next. As the energy from the alien structure continued to surge, Dr. Jansen felt a strange shift in the air. The temperature rose even higher, and a blinding light filled the sky. The earth beneath them seemed to buckle as though the planet itself was being torn apart. The light from the structure grew brighter, casting an ominous glow over the landscape. And then, from the center of the chaos, something unexpected began to happen. A being appeared. At first, it was just a figure, barely visible against the blinding light. But as it emerged fully, Dr. Jansen's breath caught in his throat. The being was neither human nor alien. It was a mixture of both, an entity born from the very energy that had been awakened. Its form was not stable, flickering between solidity and light, like a being made of raw energy. This was no ordinary alien. It was a creature that had been altered by the force of the energy they had unleashed. The transformation was complete. The creature's skin glowed with an intense fiery light. It appeared to be made of living energy, each movement crackling with power. Its body seemed to pulse with the intensity of the planet's ancient energy, and its eyes burned with an unearthly glow. There was no doubt now. The alien had undergone a complete transformation, becoming something far more dangerous and far more powerful than anything the humans could have anticipated. But the creature wasn't just an alien. It was a living manifestation of the energy that had been awakened by the humans. It had been born of their mistake, a result of their reckless probing and experimentation. And as it stood before them, it was clear that the alien was not just angry. It was seeking something. It was seeking revenge. The alien's first movements were slow, deliberate, as it adjusted to its new form. Its body flickered in and out of existence, a reflection of the raw energy that powered it. Dr. Jansen's team stood frozen, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what they were witnessing. The alien was not simply an evolved being. It was a force of nature itself, a living embodiment of the planet's power. The creature's eyes locked onto Dr. Jansen, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. There was no doubt in his mind now. The alien was not just angry at the humans. It blamed them for its transformation, for the pain it was enduring. It was hunting them, and it would not stop until it had made them pay. The air around them crackled with static, and the temperature began to rise even higher. The alien opened its mouth, and though no words came out, there was no mistaking the feeling of deep, guttural pain that radiated from it. It was not just a creature of rage. It was a being caught in an unimaginable internal struggle, fighting the fire that burned inside it, fighting the destructive power that had been forced upon it. Dr. Jansen tried to speak, but his voice was lost in the roar of energy that surrounded them. The alien didn't seem to care about his words. It was consumed by its transformation, its power, and its need for retribution. The creature began to move towards them, and the very ground shook as it did. Each step seemed to crack the earth, sending shockwaves through the air. There was no escape. The planet was no longer just a passive observer. It had become an active participant in the battle that was unfolding. The alien's transformation was only the beginning. It was now a being of immense power, and it was ready to destroy anything that stood in its way. The humans, realizing the sheer power of the creature, began to panic. Dr. Jansen tried to come up with a plan, but there was no time. The alien was too powerful, its energy too overwhelming. They were trapped, and there was nowhere to run. But as the alien closed in on them, a strange thing happened. The creature stopped, its glowing eyes fixed on the humans. For a moment, it seemed to hesitate, as though it was unsure whether to continue its attack. And then, in a flash of light, the creature vanished, leaving the humans standing in stunned silence. It was as though the alien had realized something that made it hesitate. But before Dr. Jansen or his team could process what had just happened, the ground began to tremble once more. The alien's transformation was far from over, and it was not finished with them yet. The struggle for survival had taken a new turn. The alien had become a living force of nature, and the humans were now its prey. The next chapter of the battle was about to begin, and no one knew who would emerge victorious. The planet trembled beneath their feet as Dr. Jansen and his team scrambled to make sense of what had just happened. The alien they had unleashed, transformed by the energy they had unknowingly triggered, was now an unstoppable force, a being born of raw power and fury. The air crackled with electricity, and the ground beneath them shook with each passing moment. The once peaceful world of the Thessalians was now a battleground, the humans caught in the middle of an ancient struggle they had no right to provoke. The creature had vanished into the blinding light, its form flickering and shifting like a ghost, leaving Dr. Jansen and his team in stunned silence. For a brief moment, they thought it was over. They had escaped. But the truth was far darker. The alien had only stopped its attack for a moment, as though it was deciding how to proceed. It had realized something important, but the battle was far from finished. Dr. Jansen's heart raced as he tried to process everything that had happened. He had spent years studying the unknown, searching for answers in the stars, but he had never anticipated this kind of consequence. What had they done? What had they unleashed? They had awakened a force beyond comprehension, and now the alien's power had grown to unimaginable levels. They had triggered its transformation, and now they were paying the price. "Is everyone all right?" Dr. Jansen called out, his voice shaky but steady. His team, bruised and battered but still alive, nodded in response, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. They had come to this planet seeking knowledge, but now they were fighting for survival, caught in the web of their own mistakes. "We need to find a way to stop it," Dr. Jansen said, his voice firm despite the chaos surrounding them. "If we don't, this planet, and everything on it, will be destroyed." But as he spoke, another tremor shook the earth, even stronger than the last. The ground cracked open, and the sky darkened, filled with an unnatural glow. The alien, still hidden in the shifting light, was closing in on them once more. Dr. Jansen felt a chill run down his spine as he realized something far more dangerous was happening. The alien wasn't just seeking revenge, it was seeking something deeper, something more profound. It had been transformed by the very energy the humans had awakened, and now it was connected to the planet itself. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a struggle between two forces of nature. The air grew thick with heat, and the light from the alien structure grew brighter, casting an eerie glow across the land. The creature appeared again, its body flickering in and out of existence, its form a blur of energy. The temperature around them soared to unbearable levels as the alien moved toward them, its glowing eyes fixed on Dr. Jansen. The fire that burned inside the creature seemed to intensify, a reflection of the internal struggle it was enduring. The alien was in pain, but its rage was even more powerful. "We can't run," Sarah, one of the team members, said, her voice trembling. "We can't escape this. It's everywhere." Dr. Jansen knew she was right. The planet itself had become a weapon, a force that was far beyond their understanding. They were trapped, and there was no way to avoid the consequences of their actions. But then, something unexpected happened. As the alien neared them, it paused. For a brief moment, it stopped, its glowing eyes searching the humans with a strange intensity. It wasn't the same creature they had seen before. The alien had changed. It was no longer just a being of pure rage. There was something more now, something deeper in its eyes, a glimmer of recognition, a flicker of thought. The alien's body flickered, and for a moment, it seemed as if the fire that burned inside it was slowly dying down. It was still powerful, still full of fury, but it wasn't the same creature. The alien's energy had shifted, no longer just a destructive force. It had become something more, something that could understand its situation. It had become aware. "What's happening?" one of the team members whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. I think it's trying to communicate," Dr. Jansen said, his voice low. He stepped forward, his hand outstretched, unsure of what to do. The alien had stopped attacking, but it was still dangerous. Yet, somehow, it was different now. It wasn't just a mindless force of destruction. It had become more than that. The alien's body flickered again, and this time, Dr. Jansen could sense it. The alien wasn't just filled with rage anymore. It was filled with confusion, pain, and something else, understanding. The transformation was not just physical. It was mental, emotional. The alien had undergone a change that was deeper than just a physical mutation. It had become self-aware, capable of choice. It was then that Dr. Jansen realized the truth. The alien wasn't seeking revenge. It wasn't trying to destroy them. It was simply lost. It had been forced into this transformation by their interference, and now it was struggling to find its place in a world that had changed too quickly for it to understand. In that moment, Dr. Jansen made a decision. He wasn't going to let the alien destroy them. Instead, he would try to communicate with it, to reach out to the being that had been born from their mistake. The humans had awoken something powerful, but they could still make things right. They had the chance to prevent further destruction, to stop the cycle of violence before it was too late. "We need to help it," Dr. Jansen said, his voice full of conviction. "We can't keep fighting it. We need to understand it." The team stared at him in disbelief. They had just been moments away from being destroyed by the alien. But now, Dr. Jansen was suggesting something entirely different. He was suggesting they communicate with it. It seemed impossible, but in that moment, it felt like the only option. "I'll try," Dr. Jansen said, "but we need to get close. We need to show it that we're not its enemies." With that, Dr. Jansen stepped forward, slowly and cautiously, his hand still outstretched. The alien's glowing eyes followed his every move, but it didn't attack. It simply watched him, as if trying to understand. The creature let out a low, guttural sound, a mix of frustration and uncertainty. It wasn't angry, not anymore. It was lost. Dr. Jansen took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. "We're not here to hurt you," he said softly, his voice calm but firm. "We made a mistake, and we want to fix it. Please, don't destroy us." For a moment, there was silence. The alien's glowing form flickered, its energy pulsing softly, almost as if it were considering Dr. Jansen's words. The ground beneath them continued to shake, but it was no longer violent. The planet was still alive, but it had stopped fighting. And then the alien did something incredible. It lowered its head, its fiery body dimming slightly. The fire that had once consumed it began to subside, and the intense heat around them lessened. The alien was still powerful, still connected to the planet's energy, but it had calmed. It was no longer a force of destruction. It had chosen peace. The world around them seemed to breathe again. The temperature cooled, the air became more breathable, and the planet's energy, once threatening to tear everything apart, now settled into a gentle hum. The battle was over. The alien had chosen not to destroy them, but to understand them. It had realized that the humans were not its enemies. They were just another species, trying to survive, just like it. And in that moment, a strange bond was formed between the two. Dr. Jansen and his team stood in awe as they watched the alien fade into the glowing light. It was no longer a creature of destruction, but a being that had learned to find peace in the chaos. The planet, too, had found its balance again, and though it would never be the same, it had become a place of harmony once more. As the alien disappeared into the sky, Dr. Jansen let out a sigh of relief. They had survived. And more importantly, they had learned that even in the face of destruction, there was always a chance for redemption. The universe, with all its dangers, still held the possibility for peace. The battle was over, but the journey had just begun.